Hey everybody, welcome back to another talk. We are back posting on Sunday mornings, and I am just extremely excited. This week was epic. We have a new president, and no matter how you feel about the president and politics, history was made this past Wednesday with our new vice president, a black female who is leading the way and is our vice president. And that's just something super exciting. And I'm so thankful to be a part of a country that has progressed this far. And so something that I wanted to say is, as our nation continues to move forward, we all know there's turbulence, controversy, different things back and forth. I would just ask that you join me in praying for unity, praying for peace for our nation and for Biden and Harris as they continue to lead the way during really a kind of a crazy, unique time with the pandemic and a lot of other things going on. So just rally around and be praying for our leaders. So we're going to jump right into Vibes Week 2 or Part 2. And I don't know about you, but do you have any pet peeves? Are there any things or thing that just, man, that is just a pet peeve of mine? This is usually an icebreaker question. It's a lot of fun. And so I get asked this actually quite often, like, oh, Caden, what are your pet peeves? And I would say a few of my pet peeves are when you have a Kirkland water bottle, yes, Kirkland specific water bottle in your car, and the little plastic sealant piece, obviously when you open it, it breaks that. And when that rattles in my car, I want to take that bottle and chuck it out the window or at the passenger, potentially in the passenger seat. So that's one big pet peeve of mine. Another pet peeve of mine, which I haven't experienced too much recently because gyms are closed, is when you enter into the locker room of a gym and you go to put your stuff in a locker and you open it up, it's unlocked, looks like it's ready to go, you open it up, and someone's crap is in this locker without a lock. It's so random, it's so silly, but I go to open the locker, and there's just someone's junk in it. And it's like, what the heck? Why don't you have a lock? Yada, yada, yada. It's no big deal, but for whatever reason, it's a pet peeve of mine. And last but certainly not least, out of many pet peeves I have, is when I get on the freeway or you're driving on the freeway and someone in front of you decides, oh, this is a good idea. I'm going to clean my windshield on the freeway, and then their windshield spray lands in a light mist all over my windshield, making it so that my windshield's now dirty, and you go to turn your wipers on and you just smear more gunk, and now you're left with the worst windshield ever. In fact, that happened to me on my way to work this morning. Getting on the 5 freeway, and this person, maybe 50 feet in front of me, 100 feet in front of me, goes, I'm on the freeway, I'm gonna clean my windshield because this is a perfect time to do that. Said no one ever. And they spray the windshield and it just gets all over my windshield, and I go, gosh darn it. And I just start to actually boil inside, and I hit my wiper, it just smears, it makes it annoying to look through my windshield right now. And then I do that thing where the anger inside of me just wells up. I'm like, oh, I'm so pissed. And then I end up speeding up, driving past them. You all, I'm just bleeding here. This is my heart. This is who I am. And my anger got the best of me, and I go not flying, but driving by them, and I do the classic stoic stare, like, do you realize what you just did? And I drive by. Like, what does that do? Who cares, Caden? Like, what's wrong with you? All of this to being said, pet peeves really do a great job of showing us that we all have anger inside of our hearts. And so it's a silly example, but the reality is we all have so much anger that can be pent up or built up, or have anger towards certain things or people or scenarios that happen in life. And as silly of an example as the windshield driving this morning, it's like, man, there's a deep-seated thing going on in my heart that I have anger that can boil up to the point of I want to zoom by someone and give them a dirty look. And so I just want to, in this talk about anger. And Generally, there are three types of anger. The first one is an aggressive expression of anger. And people that typically express anger aggressively say things like shut up, or they cuss, or they say something like you'll be sorry. This is typically seen as lashing out. A lot of their nonverbal cues look like increased volume in their voice. They get really angry or loud. Invasion of personal privacy. So, kind of like talking to someone just like right up in their face. You all know that kind of that 4-inch margin of like when someone's right up in your grill, it's like awkward and honestly usually inappropriate. Uh, and last but not least, oftentimes they're nonverbal. They do the glaring, kind of like I did driving by the guy that I'm mad at, kind of that glare, just stare, stoic look at someone. And so typically that is kind of how people that lean towards expressing anger through aggression act and behave. The second type of anger expression is passive. And I would say, I don't know about you, but I kind of lean probably more towards this one because I'm just kind of a happy-go-lucky, don't want to make people mad or angry personally. And so passive expression of anger looks like, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, don't be mad at me, and then you go and say it. And a lot of their nonverbal way people express as in a passive way is they kind of bite their lip or tongue when they're talking. They have this apologetic tone, and they usually kind of lower their voice and they sheepishly or kind of tiptoe around maybe the confrontation or whatever the thing that's making them angry. And then last but certainly not least is the assertive way of expressing anger. And they say things like, I think this, or I'm angry about, and they try to explain what they're angry about, or I don't understand why this is that way. And that's how they kind of express their emotions of anger. And a lot of the nonverbal for an assertive way to express anger is direct but not evasive eye contact. So when someone's like looking at you and they're making eye contact, but it's not like glaring or in your face, they respect spatial boundaries, and there's usually a strong, confident, but definitely a relaxed posture, not this like puffed up chest like I'm going to throw down in a moment. And so this is all great and good stuff. And so out of these three expressions of anger, I would argue, and I think we should all work on, the goal is to become less aggressive and or less passive, and definitely become more assertive in the way we express our anger. And so how do we go about doing that? How do I go about becoming more assertive, less aggressive, less passive, and kind of find that middle ground and being more assertive? Because at the end of the day, anger is a part of all of our emotions. It's something that we all experience. And anger isn't a bad thing. It is okay to be angry when you see injustice. It is okay to feel the emotion of anger when something is terrible is happening. But it's very much how do we use or understand the emotion of anger, and how do we live and reflect Christ even in and through the fact that we deal with anger. And so I would say how we do that is a good example is turning to James 3. And in James 3, verses 13 through 18, I'm going to read it. And it talks about wisdom. And it talks about kind of leaning into wisdom and how the wisdom of Christ will help guide our lives. And I think that is so powerful and true when we are dealing with anger that can get the best of us at times. And so here we are in James 3, 13 through 18. And it's titled Wisdom from Above. So in verse 13, who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, you kind of see that like festering up, like the selfish ambition, jealousy in your hearts is kind of that anger that starts to snare your heart. Do not boast and be false to truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. Verse 16, for where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. Now, verse 17, but the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. And I did a quick little Google search on the definition of anger. And the definition of anger is a strong feeling of annoyance, displeasure, and or hostility. And then I went and I looked at, well, what's the opposite of anger? And there were a few things mentioned, but the thing that stood out to me, that also stands out to me in James chapter 3 here, is the opposite of anger truly is peace. And I think we both can kind of understand that. The way I reacted this morning on my drive about the windshield thing, you could see that the anger caused me to do things that were not peaceful. Like, there was no peace going on in my car. My coffee was kind of spilling because I sped up. I drove by, I looked over. I probably drove a little dangerously. I mean, there's nothing about that warrants peace. And so the opposite of anger is peace. And how I kind of want to wrap this up for you is the fact that you and I we're going to experience emotions of anger. And my hope and my prayer for you is that you seek first the kingdom, you seek first God's wisdom. And the beautiful thing about wisdom is none of us are born with wisdom. A lot of us are born with knowledge, some of us more than others. Some of us are just genetics. We have a high IQ, we are very smart, but none of us are born with wisdom. The beautiful thing about wisdom is that it comes when you accrue and you live life, you accrue experiences. Wisdom comes from seeking God and learning from the lessons that life has to offer. And so you and I can gain wisdom, and God asks us, we can ask God for wisdom. And wisdom brings about peace, and wisdom brings about ways to deal with our anger. So no matter if you're someone who leans toward being more aggressive, or you're someone who's more passive with your anger, I believe that following and leaning into Jesus and seeking him will help you become a little bit more assertive with your emotion of anger so that you can deal with that emotion properly and show Christ's love and live a meaningful, valuable life and not allow anger to rule your day or rule your emotions. And at the end of the day, the very end of the day, I say that a lot, I notice. But because of Jesus, anger doesn't have to be the boss of you. Thank you so much for tuning in to another talk, and I can't wait to see you at Church in the Park or Drive-In Church on January 29th. Bye, everybody.